I would count building as a hobby of mine. I love building stuff. If I could have more holidays where I could just build more houses, I don't care about living in them, I just enjoy building them. Because I'm fascinated by the process. I'm fascinated by taking something and turning it into something which kind of defies gravity, like it hangs suspended in midair. Over January, I was in Tasmania and working with Sam Clear. Some of you guys know him. We were building a chapel on his property. So he's bought 17 acres on the side of a mountain, and we're building a stone chapel. And basically having to find all the stone in the rainforest. So it was pretty hard work. So you're sort of scavenging through rainforest, finding a rock, throw it 5 metres, walk 5 metres, pick it up, throw it another 5 metres. Repeat that for about 7,000 rocks. And I spent a lot of time reflecting on evangelisation while I was there. As we know, St. Francis of Assisi hears the call of God speaking from the San Damiano cross, saying, "Go and rebuild my church." He begins his apprenticeship by picking up rocks and actually starting to rebuild a church. I reckon that there's actually something integral about this image of actual building. You know, not to look at it as a metaphor, but look at it as the actual plan, the actual structure of how we should be doing evangelisation. That if we can actually learn how to build, if we can learn how to put stuff together, and the process, the way of thinking, I think you can apply it perfectly to evangelisation. Okay, so what I want to do this morning is take you through a series of questions you need to ask. And then hopefully that you can start to understand how is a building actually put together, what's the process. You know, very simply, in building, like if you look at this house we're in at the moment, a third of the time that it took to build this house was actually just sitting down, having meetings and looking at a piece of paper, working out what do we actually want to do, why do we want to do it, how are we going to do it. The next third of the process was about digging the foundations. The final third is actually just putting the house up. The house actually goes up really quickly if you've done the other bits properly. And so in a sense, if you look through the program of where we're going to go, it's kind of built on that idea. Firstly is, what are the questions you've got to ask? And then secondly, we start to look at how do we look at the foundation? And then finally, we start to look at what do you need to do to actually build the house. Okay? So, first thing is the questions that we dare not ask. Because this is the important thing with most ministry and evangelisation. Firstly, people are not asking questions at all. And if they are asking questions, they're asking the wrong questions. Normally they're asking questions of, how are we going to make this event amazing? You know, who's going to do the flyers? Who's going to organise the cups of tea? You ask those questions right at the end. Okay, those are the questions that are basically, how do we put the roof on? Or how do we put the bricks together? If, like, whatever ministry you're doing, whatever you're involved in, be it a parish, a youth group, parish prayer group, whatever, there's a bunch of questions which nobody is asking. And you've got to learn how to ask those questions. So I think firstly, in terms of any building structure, the first two questions is it possible and is it necessary? You know, you can build the most amazing things. This is an actual building. I think this is actually in China. Phenomenal. Unbelievable bit of engineering and architecture. Is it possible? Yes. Is it necessary? Maybe not. You know, maybe it's terrible to live in. In terms of evangelisation, I think this is where you've got to learn to start asking dangerous questions. Is it possible to evangelise every person who lives in this suburb? Is it possible to evangelise every person in Melbourne? And have every single person in Melbourne have a living relationship with Jesus Christ? Second question is it necessary? This is a question I often ask the guys in Canberra. How many people in the world are going to go to heaven? What percentage would you give? Okay. Now the reason why these two questions are important is because that second question I think is a crucial one. If you're working with any group, like particularly if you're trying to get a parish to become a parish of missionary disciples, you can bang your head against a brick wall every day trying to get them to go out and evangelize. You've got to stop and say, is it even important that we evangelize? Is it necessary? Because in the Catholic Church, ever since Vatican II, there's been this very strong idea of universalism, that everyone's going to go to heaven. And it's pretty dominant in our society, even for those who don't believe in God. You know, we don't believe there is a heaven, but if there is, everyone gets to go there. You've got to kind of ask the questions that no one's actually asking. Because if your parish, your youth group, your ministry believes that everyone's going to go to heaven anyway, why are we evangelizing? Okay, our evangelization is simply to increase our social connections. You know, and so we're only going to evangelize the nice people that we want to hang out with, because the church is really just a giant social club. So we need to start to ask these questions of what is actually important here? What are we actually doing? Now, first bit, okay, just for you guys. In pairs, ask the question. First question, is it possible for every person in Burwood to come to know Jesus Christ in a living relationship? So the second question, what percentage of the world do you think is going to go to heaven? Now, the basic thing is, you guys probably just never asked either of those questions.
No. True.
But they're fascinating questions because of what they stir up. And they're fascinating questions because they raise other questions. What is heaven? What is hell? Okay, what is mercy? So these two questions. Is it possible for a whole suburb to be converted? Is it possible for a whole city to be converted? Is it necessary for a whole suburb to be converted? Okay. Now, the first question I think is fascinating because it does raise lots of questions in terms of who's to blame. Okay. If people don't respond to the gospel, is it because God just never destined them to be Christians? You know, if we take almost like a hardline Calvinist perspective, that there are some people destined for the book of life and some people destined for the book of the damned, you know, maybe that's our way of understanding the fact that some people don't want to respond to the gospel. Is it their fault? You know, is it that they are just so obstinate and hard-hearted that there are some people who simply cannot be evangelized? No matter how much you love them, how much you pray for them, they are closed off. That's a whole anthropological question, you know, what actually is possible with the human heart. But then I think the most uncomfortable question, is it our fault? You know, is it that we're actually not doing it properly? Maybe we don't even understand what the gospel is. We're off running ourselves crazy, running events and parish missions and all sorts of things, and people are not responding. Maybe God's doing everything, maybe the people are hungry, but maybe actually we are the problem. And so this is where it's a question which opens up other questions, and I think is fascinating. If we look at that third option, that maybe it's us, I think it raises this uncomfortable possibility that actually we don't have enough love. That we don't actually want the whole world to be converted, because it's going to make our life really uncomfortable. Okay? Australia is 25% Catholic. Depending on what stats you look at, about 10% of those attend Mass regularly. Okay, so you've got about 5.5 million Catholics in Australia. It's probably about 6 million now. So you've got about 600,000 Catholics attend Mass regularly on a Sunday. If all the Catholics came back, what's that going to look like? You've now got 10 times as many people at church on a Sunday. So if your church has 300 people, you've now got 3,000 people. Or if your priest is now doing 3 masses on a Sunday, he's now got to do 30 masses on a Sunday. think of the parking nightmare that that's going to create. How many spiritual directors do you now need? How many confessors do you now need? How many pastoral carers and pastoral workers? Like, as much as we might have these nice pious prayers of, Lord, convert the whole world and bring everyone into your love, think of the practicalities and it gets a little bit dangerous. You know, like if everyone came back, we wouldn't be ready. And I think it raises that really uncomfortable question. I don't think we'd actually have enough love to care for those people. You know, we like having a parish filled with educated middle-class people with not many social problems because they're easy to get along with. Do we as a church actually have enough love to embrace the whole world? So I think that's the first uncomfortable question that it raises. That whole thing of, is it necessary? If you're trying to get people to evangelize, I think that's a powerful question to ask. Firstly, because it's got to draw out what actually is the theology underpinning most people's faith. It starts to raise fascinating questions. Once again, it's a question that can't actually be answered, but it's a question that raises other questions. We believe firmly in the mercy of God. Okay, we believe that God is able to win a victory no matter how great the sin. But is that even enough? Okay, so say if we believe in this sort of universalist theology that everyone gets to go to heaven, what about the people who don't exist because of sin? You ever thought about that? So there's a guy that I know in Perth who was massively addicted to heroin as an 18-year-old. He probably only had a couple of years left of his life because he wouldn't have lasted very long. He has a massive conversion, now becomes the most full-on Catholic there is. He's now married, he's got 6 kids. There are 6 people who exist because he had a conversion. He might have died, and God's mercy may have drawn him into heaven, but his children would never have come into existence. You ever thought about that? But once again, like if you're trying to get people to think differently about evangelization, you've got to start asking these sort of questions, you know, because there is a really big problem in the church where people have misunderstood Vatican II. Okay, like it is very much a misunderstanding. There's a great book written by Ralph Martin called Will Everybody Be Saved? Or How Many Will Be Saved? I think that's the exact title. But he actually goes into this really in-depth study into the documents of Vatican II and shows that we actually have intentionally missed part of what the document was saying. Like it does say that salvation is possible for everybody, however, there's a lot of people who are hardening their hearts and intentionally choosing to not follow God. And we believe that salvation is not possible for that person. So it's important that we actually go deeper into this mystery of, is it actually necessary to build this building which is the church? There's a real temptation to think that everyone's actually doing fine without us and somehow we make their lives worse. And so I think we need to come back and ask these hard questions. Okay, so first thing, is it possible? Is it necessary?